I'm joined now by Jake, Travis, and Julian, the hosts of the QAnon Anonymous podcast. This is the premier podcast when it comes to all things conspiracy theories, QAnon, and we spoke a couple of years ago, actually 3 years ago, almost to the day. And I wanted to get you guys back on, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation because back then, a few years ago, and for the last several years, we've been kind of immersed in this world of conspiracy theory from largely a right wing that has been out of power. Well, now we're in a situation where Donald Trump is in power, bolstered by the very people who thought that he would be the one to take down a lot of the ideas at the center of these conspiracy theories and QAnon. And so I'm curious, first and foremost, you know, we have the QAnon conspiracy theory, which is that there is this Satan worshiping cabal of pedophiles at the highest levels of government. Nothing better exemplifies that than what we're seeing with all of the Epstein stuff. And yet now, whereas Donald Trump had the opportunity to dismantle this system from the inside, which, by the way, was what his campaign was predicated on, he's instead opted to entrench that very system by refusing to release these files. So I'm curious what the response has been like from that universe, where now there seems to have been a bait and switch that took place at the highest levels of government from the people who were supposed to take this down.
I would say the response has been mixed. There is a lot of dismay and confusion and bewilderment that the man that they thought would take down Epstein and expose all the people he's involved with is all of a sudden saying it's a Democrat hoax. Especially confusing considering his own attorney general at one point claimed that she had the Epstein list on her desk, and now the official line from the DOJ is that it doesn't exist at all. But of course, the QAnon followers are, really masters at cognitive dissonance. So at the same time, many of them still trusting the plan, thinking this is some sort of 5D chess move, and the truth will still somehow come out.
Some of the diehards, especially people who have like a pretty large following on X, formerly Twitter, they will do these kind of like long game theory threads about how Donald Trump is, he's bringing awareness to Epstein, that he's doing this on purpose so that he can draw attention to it. So he's got Democrats calling for the release, and then he can release and it will expose them. And it's all a part of the plan, 4D chess. But you're sort of average, like on the couch QAnon enjoyer, at least anecdotally from what I've seen online, is like, hey, wait a minute, like this. Like, I have to go and defend this guy to like my other friend. Like, there seems to be like a little bit more of a dissatisfaction amongst your average sort of like QAnon enjoyer, whereas the influencers are still doing all of these like game theory threads to explain, wait, no, this is still a good thing.
I think they're getting to the point where it's like, well, how deep undercover is he? Did he have to actually do the things with the other pedophiles, or
Well, that's the part that I'm having trouble with, because when we spoke last time, again, this was a few years ago, but one of the things that was most striking that you said was that there's always some convenient new conspiracy theory to explain away any potential disappointment or any current disappointment, right? Like there can never be a rival, because again, we're dealing with like crazy conspiracy theories, but so there can never be a rival. So there always has to be something to take you from, okay, yes, it didn't go where we thought it was going to go because X, Y, and Z. But I mean, I guess what I'm having trouble with is this is so cut and dry. And I understand like a normal conspiracy theory, you can't get there because it's crazy, and you're not going to be able to prove that somebody unless we find a Satan worshiping cabal of pedophiles in the woods somewhere at night that consists of a group of like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and George Soros and Nancy Pelosi, and right, unless we find that, we're probably not going to get there. But this was an instance where we could get there, and you have, to your exact point, you have Pam Bondi, who said, I have the client list on my desk. And so I understand that it's always easy to explain away this stuff, but how do you explain away something where the finish line was in sight?
I think that when the Wall Street Journal contacted Trump, or at least his administration, for comment, there was a certain amount of panic internally, because pulling out the terms Epstein hoax, that's a big failure, I think. And they're having to do a lot of damage control right now, because he did run on the idea that he was going to expose all this stuff. But as soon as the Wall Street Journal said, "Hey, we have you drawing, a woman's shape and writing mysterious birthday poetry to Epstein, and it looks like your signature is the pubic hair on the drawing of the woman." I think at that point he decided to just fold back on his usual, it's like, well, this is just a hoax. And as soon as you try to sell in these people who've been waiting for years on the fact that the Epstein thing is actually just invented by Democrats, I think that has been way more difficult. I think that even their, very, very well exercised muscle of cognitive dissonance is not quite cutting it at this point. And there is a lot of debate, I think, internally. People are kind of splitting off.
Something that's really struck me about all of this is, if I was a Trump supporter or an adherent to any of these conspiracy theories or QAnon or look, the Epstein stuff is not a conspiracy theory. I know I keep dropping it into the same bucket, but I think the through line between all of this is it's hard to feel like Trump doesn't have utter contempt for his own supporters. Like, to claim that you're going to release the list, to see Dan Bongino predicate his entire brand on releasing the list, Kash Patel on releasing the list, hearing Alina Habba say that it's going to be explosive, seeing Pam Bondi say that she has the stuff on her desk right now, only for these people to all turn around suddenly and say, oh, there's no there there. And in fact, not only is there no there, but to say on one day that the case is closed and the whole thing is shut down and there was no client list, nothing ever existed, and then a few days later to come out and say, just kidding, it does exist, but it's a forgery from Barack Obama, the Biden administration, James Comey, John Brennan, who somehow had control of the federal government deep state when Epstein died in 2019, when the president was not any Democrat, but rather Donald Trump himself. I mean, it just strikes me as so contemptuous for the people who support him. Is there some sense of that? Like, again, I say this all couching my answer in understanding that there's always another answer to push the conspiracy theory down the road. But this, again, is so cut and dry. Are there any supporters of his that you're seeing, deep in the world of this stuff that just feel like they're being duped because they're being duped?
I think this runs into the problem of the fact that a lot of people, they turn to podcasters like Dan Bongino because it's pure entertainment for them, and they just like hearing him say that the Epstein list is going to be explosive. And then when he was a mere podcaster, he could promise anything he wanted. He wasn't really in power. Right. He can chat up a storm. He can say whatever he wants about what's going to be revealed, and that made his the people who listen to him feel very good. But once he actually got in power, once he had to face the actual political realities of like what to release and what not to release and how that might make Trump look, that he ran into a brick wall there. Because I mean, my I think the most plausible theory is that there's something in the files that makes Trump look pretty bad, and so right. As a consequence, he didn't reverse course. He allegedly, according to some reporting, has some internal conflict because this is obviously now very bad for his brand. If he had talked a big game as a podcaster, but once he became the deputy FBI director, he officially says that there's no Epstein client list at all. So, I think that it's like a lot of them do feel very disappointed and dismayed, but at the same time, they do have a short attention span. And so, you can sort of see the way that they're trying to deflect now. They're doing things like, for example, releasing some grand jury testimony, which like no one really asked for, right. Won't really resolve the issue. I mean, when they released the order releasing the grand jury testimony, they very specifically said that it wouldn't change any of the facts discussed in that original memo, which they said they would not be prosecuting anyone else related to the Epstein scandal. So it's not going to really. Whatever is going to be released, it's not going to change anything that's really substantial. It's not going to really give them what they want, which is like this big exposure and an arrest. But yeah, they really have short attention spans, if I'm being honest. And I think that these conservative commentators, these right wing commentators, they'll do what they always do. They'll spin up a new scandal. They'll deflect. They'll say that they'll do some negative polarization. They say like they're only saying these things to get Trump, and don't you hate the people who want to get Trump? And then they'll move on. That's my prediction.
Well, I guess that boils down to what the question at the core of this is, which is, are they there to protect Donald Trump and Republicans, or are they there because of why they say they're there, which is like exposing this deep state cabal of pedophiles, which, the closest thing we have to that in real life is the Epstein situation. And so what's the goal at the end of the day? I know what it is for the Charlie Kirks of the world, right? It's just these are political operatives, but the adherents more broadly, like, there seems to be some conflict between, are you here because in good faith you really want to expose some heinous behavior by what may very well be some bipartisan group of deep state elites, or are you here because really at the end of the day your final goal is just making sure that Donald Trump is protected?
I think there's a real mix among QAnon followers. I think there are some people who have always seen Trump as a kind of tool to get what they want, and they're maybe reaching a point of disappointment. But I also think that there are some who, their very last holdout, their very last kind of hope in politics, that there is one man who is unscathed by all of these scandals, was Donald Trump. And I think those are kind of hitting a wall, and some of them are falling in line and saying, hey, there's no way that, I've fundamentally gotten this wrong for so many years. There has to be something more. And it's worth also mentioning that the list was always a little bit of a kind of phantom hope, right? I mean, this is along partisan lines. The hope was the list will show that your guys are more implicated than our guys. But the idea of a list in the first place is not really accurate. I mean, we have the little black book. It was in PDF form before any of this even began, before QAnon was even, created. And that's just the people that Epstein had phone numbers for, sometimes multiple, and then there's, of course, the flight manifests, which are Epstein's planes, records of who flew on them. The list of clients, as if this is some sort of cyber cafe where people check in and have to put their name down. Right. I mean, that's an absurdity. And I think that's where we've kind of seen over time QAnon creating false versions of it, where they'll add Tom Hanks or people that they just wish were part of it, and people that they thought were a part of it as part of their QAnon beliefs formerly. So it is really a big mess, and I'm not sure that anybody who's kind of waiting for more information about this really knows what exactly they're waiting for.
I think a lot of QAnon and Trump supporters, or MAGA in general, is put in like a really tough situation right now, because they have to sort of decide, do I hate pedophiles more than I love Donald Trump?
Right.
And so it is. I do, and as I've seen some users online discussing this whole thing, I do think that this is a potential off ramp for QAnon believers or Trump supporters, in the same way that Jan 6, in some ways, I had some family members who were pro Trump, and after Jan 6, they were like, you know what, I'm not for this actually, and they're off. I think that calling, as Julian mentioned earlier, saying the words Epstein and hoax in the same sentence. It's not that, I'm fighting the deep state and I'm trying to get this released, but we can't get it released. He could have just strung that battle along for 4 years. And I'm fairly confident that his, most fervent supporters would have kind of gone along for the ride. But to come right out and say, no, this is a no, this is a hoax. It was made up by Democrats, made up by Obama. That really puts them in a tough position, because the last thing they ever would have categorized Epstein was as a hoax. In fact, to a lot of conspiracy theorists, when they talk about the Epstein case, they use it to say that other conspiracies that are more outlandish are real. So they'll say, well, Epstein is real. So what else are they doing? It's kind of the foundation in which they can build upon the rest of what they believe that the cabal is up to. And oftentimes not even citing real facts from the Epstein case as their sources, but saying, well, because of this, we know that they're doing this. So to have that dismantled, I don't know, it puts them in like a really tough position. And I think we're going to see over the next couple of months how that shakes out.
I think many people think many things about the Epstein situation. None of them are that it's a hoax. There is zero people out there that want to hear those words and go, wow, I knew it.
Right. Yeah.
That is just I think that is a wild defensive move. He could have said anything. I think the appropriate thing, if I were to write a script for Donald Trump on how to talk to his QAnon followers, would have been to say, well, there's a deep state, and what they've done is they've manipulated a lot of these documents to make them impossible for me to release because they've woven me into them. That's the closest thing you're going to get at this point to a good way out of this. But unfortunately, it's too late. He just fell back on some words that were extremely unfortunate and have zero base.
Right.
Like there is nobody that wants to hear
that. I guess like at the end of the day, I don't know for these QAnon adherents and those who kind of follow the Epstein situation, I don't know what the point of Donald Trump is. Because if he's there, his warts notwithstanding, clearly this guy has a pretty sordid past, like with everything that he's done. I mean, the sexual assault and all of it. But I think that they viewed him as his vehicle to do something. And so now I don't understand what the point of him is if not only is he not going to be the vehicle to do the thing that he said he was going to do, but he seems very much implicated. I mean, one of the kind of jokes that I made in a video that I did this past week was, if a husband comes home and sees his wife in the house and all of a sudden he hears like a noise in the closet and he's like, who's in the closet? And she's like, oh, there's nobody here in the kitchen, look. And he's like, right, but who's in the closet? And she's like, look, there's nobody in the pantry. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, who's in the closet? And she's like, I don't see anybody in the living room. Eventually you're gonna recognize that she's cheating, right? Like there's very clearly a there. That's what Trump is doing here, where he won't. I mean, the grand jury, the grand jury testimony is the perfect example because nobody asked for that, and you're not going to get all of the Epstein files released. This is going to be a tiny fraction of the information that they have, and on top of that, Trump and Pam Bondi said that it would only be pertinent information. Well, who is the arbiter of what's pertinent in this case? Well, it's the guy who may very well be implicated in these files, and the attorney general whose boss is the guy who may be implicated in these files, and so they're going to be the arbiters of what they deem pertinent here. So we're never going to get any information that shows Trump implicated in any of this stuff, and that's by design. And so when you have this guy who keeps offering everybody something that they didn't ask for, very much in the same way how when you have this woman at home who's showing you every room other than the closet where you hear the sounds coming from, it becomes clear that maybe the reason for this, that the natural conclusion you can draw is that he himself is implicated in all of this. And so that's what makes it so difficult for me to understand, what the point of Trump is for any of these people.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Brian, we're going to need a new QAnon to come in and explain why Trump is unable to. In fact, Julian made such a funny joke. We were talking the other day about this, and Julian said that the funniest and dumbest thing that could happen is that one of these, because this was supposed to be a QAnon government, right? We have Tulsi Gabbard, we've got Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, all in these incredibly high levels of power. They are no longer, on the campaign trail. They are, pulling the levers. And the funniest thing that could happen is that one of his like goons or one of the bottom of the barrel people that he's sort of been stuck with on this second term, that they have to become the insider leaking out, that they become a new deep state, but this time to stop Donald Trump. And I think that's probably what's going to happen, or a new QAnon is going to have to come in and explain to people what the code was. They're going to have to break down the alphanumeric, the gematria to show what hoax really meant when Trump said it in regards to Epstein.
On the prospect of deprogramming, people. Is this enough to get people off of kind of the QAnon train, or does the fact that you have yet another government, yes, it was one that said that they were going to be the ones to release all of the damaging information, or does that entrench them even more? Because then they're like, oh man, this deep state must be really bad. If even they could consume Donald Trump and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, we have to redouble our efforts because the deep state is a way bigger foe than we could have possibly imagined.
It's that old joke about a conspiracy theorist goes to heaven and then asks God, so I want to know really who killed JFK? And God says, well, I hate to tell you, but it was Oswald and he acted alone. The conspiracy theorist says, boy, this goes up higher than I thought. I mean, you're really asking if people who dedicated maybe like 8 or 9 years of their life to this whole worldview to say, actually, I was totally off for a big chunk of my life. That's a big ask of anyone. It's not easy to do. Totally. It's extremely uncomfortable. It's not impossible to reevaluate your belief system, to reorient your worldview. But it is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I would say that there is one final out, which is that we now have AI. We are familiar with the term fake news. There's one final retreat, which is that nothing you see is real.
Well, that's convenient,
and I think
right?
Yeah, of course. But, we've given them that out as well. I mean, who's to say that this isn't an elaborate set of AI that is beaming this information into you, and that you need to go deeper into Telegram. A lot of these followers, they're already very much marginalized in terms of where they get their information. So, for some of them, it might be a dip even deeper into, numerology and gematria, and like seeing things in more religious or spiritual terms. I think that the final retreat will be perhaps beyond politics, because I think, and they're not the only ones, people are pretty disappointed in politics currently, and it is pretty clear that if we ever do find out the full extent of Epstein's trafficking operation and the people who frequented it or were clients of it, quote unquote, that we are going to find out that a lot of our ruling class are deeply corrupt and open to things like pedophilia, which to most people are, obviously like morally deeply wrong. Yeah. So it's a difficult one.
First of all, I have to ask, where do you go to get a sense of what everybody's thinking right now within like the QAnon community?
Well, there are a few places. There's a community on Truth Social. There's still an active community on X. I mean, there's still, if you can believe it, on 8chan, there's what they call the Q Research Board, where they're still making threads. I check there for those are really the main hangouts. There's also a couple of media enterprises that are based around QAnon. There's a business called Badlands Media. They produce multiple video shows and podcasts, and you can see them on Rumble, which is like kind of a YouTube competitor. So yeah, there's still a very active sort of like social media community and general media ecosystem around QAnon.
There are some people also who've retreated to Telegram because Telegram offers a kind of infinite group call. So you'll have people who will just be sitting like for 8 to 12 hours a day in these kind of group calls, just kind of chatting about stuff that comes up. And those are little like, I guess like buckets of community and information that are oftentimes pretty isolated. And we have seen people, more charismatic people take advantage of that and, kind of start to pretend that maybe they actually have access to privileged information. Since everybody comes there believing that in the first place, and people are getting more and more desperate and aren't, getting any relief from it. In fact, quite the opposite from the president. They are kind of peeling off into these strange subcults that sometimes manifest even in the physical world, and kind of essentially create these strange little sectarian
right.
cults.
So you've got these websites, you've got these message boards, you've got the Telegram group chats. I know that this is very much a live ball, but what is the sense right now? Like, is there some general consensus on what happens next? Are people just kind of sitting and waiting for some shoe to drop, and very much the way that mainstream audiences are just kind of sitting and watching for the next shoe to drop? Maybe that'll be, some grand jury testimony, which of course is going to be bullshit, but it's going to be the next thing to happen. We'll also see there's legislation right now that's pending that would compel the release of the Epstein files, but that probably won't take effect until September. It's called a discharge petition, so it takes a certain amount of days to what's called ripen, which allows them to act on it. So, again, like what is the general consensus right now?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it's like the most devoted QAnon followers is that I mean, they've been rewarded for sort of taking positions that sort of defy expectations. When Trump was running, he was a joke. He had no chance, and he wound up getting elected. And when he was finally elected, thought the Mueller investigation would sink him, and they didn't. And then people thought January 6th would end his political career. I certainly thought that. But then he was elected again. So I feel like these people who have been following him for years feel like he managed to rise to power despite all of these obstacles, despite everyone else thinking he's down for the count, despite thinking that he was no good. So they just feel like they don't understand why he's doing this, and they don't know where this is going exactly, but they just have faith because they feel like that faith has been rewarded before.
And don't you know, Brian, that other shoes don't drop?
That's right.
Well, yeah, I think, I think a lot of people are sitting and waiting and hoping for that save, right? Either it's the release of the grand jury testimony that's more favorable towards Trump than it is towards, say, I don't know, anybody else, ideally a Democrat. Just something where they can kind of latch on and go, almost like a life preserver, where they can go, oh, thank God. Well, now we know that the reason he said hoax was he had to let the Democrats think that, he had dropped the ball on this so that they asked for the release. Oh, phew. It's like they're waiting for that checkmate 5D chess move that allows them to go, oh, I don't have to go to my friends and family and explain why all of a sudden the thing that I was telling them that Trump was going to expose over the last 12 years, however long, is actually he thinks it's a hoax now and he's not going to do anything and potentially implicated himself. So I think people are just kind of waiting, but maybe if they wait long enough and something doesn't come, something else might be able to come by and scoop them up. Hopefully something healthier. I don't know.
The way that I've been thinking about this, because my kind of North Star in politics is persuasion. And so I can talk to my left-wing audience all day and get pats on the head. But really the goal here in politics is to broaden your coalition so that you can gain power, so that you can enact your agenda and do something on healthcare, on reproductive rights, on climate change, on gun violence, on the minimum wage, all of the things, right? And so as I'm thinking about persuasion here, I'm wondering whether you think it's worth it, at least with this subset of people, to say, okay, on one hand, either he knew that he was never going to release the files and just straight up lied to you, or on the other hand, he can't release the files because he's in them, in which case it's a cover-up. Either way, it's bad. Either way, for these people especially, it should be disqualifying. Is given your extensive knowledge of this community, are the persuasion efforts worth it?
I say I'm never willing to give up on anyone else. I don't have a lot of hope, just because I know the research about cognitive dissonance and resolving cognitive dissonance, and the research says that when they're met with disappointment, when the real world doesn't meet their expectations, when the things that they see in actual physical reality isn't aligned with the world they have in their head, they kind of double down on the world in their head. That's just human nature.
I think it's worth it because even if we don't, I don't know, pull them over to the left side of politics, let's just say, just to be general, we might pull them away from politics in general. They might, and somebody who's deep might go, you know what, this feels bad to keep following it. And, we've seen this in some cases in the past. This feels bad. I'm constantly having to explain myself. You know what? I'm going to focus on my other hobby, fishing.
Yeah.
Whatever. Spending more time with my family. Even if it's not getting them to come to our side of political policy, whatever, convert them into Democrats, convert them into liberals, leftists, anything. If you can get them out of that trench and get them back more involved with their friends and their families and a world outside of, political internet discussions, I think that's worth it. And I think, one thing that we've seen over time is that the more time people stay away from internet and don't submerge themselves in these subcultures, that their family and friends can find a working, healthy relationship with them. So I do think it's worth it, even if it's not to convince them that your side, has a better idea, just to pull them away from a lot of the negative, side effects that come with idolizing somebody like Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, look, when it comes to the toxic stew that is the internet, take it from four guys who marinate in this stew on a daily basis. I can assure you, the ironic thing about that is, just like from a psychological perspective, a few years ago when I first started this, it was really easy to compartmentalize. And I started doing political videos in the beginning of the Trump era in 2017, 2018. But I was writing, doing articles and written politics prior to that for a few years. And it was always I was always very capable of doing my work and then coming home, turning that part of my brain off. And granted, I was lucky enough to be able to do that because even in Trump's first term, he was doing things that had that had major consequences for real people, and so I recognized the privilege that I had to be able to be in a position where I could just turn it off. But even just from a psychological perspective, after having been in this for so long, it has gotten more and more difficult to the point where, now, almost a decade later that I'm doing this, it's all but impossible to be able to just flip it off like a light switch. You're immersed in this stuff all day, and I guess in that way I can kind of empathize with what these folks who are immersed in these message boards and these QAnon conspiracy theories, because it kind of consumes you, and it's difficult to get away from it. And I do find that if I'm able to pry myself away from work and go on a vacation, or sometimes I'll literally invite friends over so that I can't work, because I know that if my friends aren't over my house, then I'm just going to keep doing it, and I can sit in front of my computer until 1 o'clock in the morning because there's always more work to do. And so, I think that in that scenario, yeah, getting away, like doing whatever you can to get away from this stuff, whether it's just, regular politics or deep in the depths of these conspiracy theories, just having distance in and of itself kind of breaks the spell, the hold that the internet has over so many people.
I would caution as well that thinking about all of this in terms of narratives and persuasion, I think misses the point that most people do still believe politicians can convince us of something, but not that they follow through. We have a real crisis in terms of being able to actually provide, to make any difference in what seems like a system on autopilot. And so as long as the narratives don't actually match the material reality that people are dealing with on a daily basis, and we don't have a good narrative and or policies behind it, then we're really not going to be able to put this Humpty Dumpty back together again. We really have to find a way for our politicians to follow through in some tangible policy way. Yeah. It does not feel good to vote for your guy, to make a big hubbub, and then to lose something as fundamental as the federal level right to abortion. Right. If we can't show people that it's worth tuning in to the mainstream narrative, and that the mainstream narrative sticks to an actual reality behind it, that we can accomplish something, that your vote, your belief even is connected to the levers of power, then we have a problem.
Right.
And I think that is really well exemplified in the Epstein case, because what we're all ignoring is the FBI went to his house on his island. They opened, by all accounts, a safe that had information in it that would probably be interesting to almost any human being of any political persuasion, pretty much anywhere in the world. And yet, where is that information? So we can debate QAnon this, or did the Democrats do more, or did the Republicans do more to expose this? At the end of the day, the belief that we have something extremely rotten at the core of this system is going to continue if we have the Federal Bureau of Investigation and, you know, the very people that we allow to essentially spy on citizens, that we allow to kind of have access to our personal lives and have, you know, real power over us, that they can't figure out something internally to get past these blockages and bring us some semblance of truth.
Right. It's been sacrifice after sacrifice. They chip away at our privacy, like what we're willing to allow them to do. They have full carte blanche of basically the complete power of the government. But you expect something in return for that. And I think the bare minimum that we expect is, to your exact point, like what was in the safe, for example. But when you get nothing in return for all of the sacrifices that we've made, I think that creates like a foundation where people then become so disillusioned in government. And granted, it's not just in conspiracy theories, right? It's when you have Democrats as well who come in office and say that they're going to do one thing, protect, expand access to healthcare, protect abortion rights. And granted, there are specific reasons why they're not able to do that. But just in general, when you have, from the Democrats' perspective, if you're not fighting as hard as you can to get the things done, because maybe you're more focused on protecting the institutions of government, protecting the filibuster, whatever it may be, that really lends itself to this idea that, okay, now people are going to lose faith in government because you did say one thing and you didn't go to the wall to get it done. And I know that, look, when Trump wants to get something done, he gets it done. It's to his credit, but also he strikes fear in the hearts of a lot of people, myself included, because he'll just ignore, the separation of powers. He'll ignore court orders. He'll ignore all of this stuff. But I think what his followers like is that he just does it. He figures it the fuck out. And for Democrats, that would be completely unheard of because, well, we have to respect the norms. We have to respect the institutions. We have to respect the filibuster. And so we couldn't possibly do this stuff. But I think it's going to be incumbent, at least, again, on the persuasion front, it's going to be incumbent on Democrats to not feel so, I guess, bound by our institutions and our norms, but rather to actually deliver for people, because they don't care about the norms. They don't care about the institutions. They just want to see healthcare. They want to see less expensive groceries. They just want to see prescription drugs that they can afford, whatever it may be. And so this idea of delivering so that people don't become disillusioned, so that they can fall into these, at the extreme, fall into these conspiratorial camps, but, at the not extreme, give up on politics. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what we have to prevent.
Well said.
So with that said, I want to give you guys the opportunity now for folks who are watching and listening. How can they see and hear more from you? And what projects are you working on that might be interesting to folks?
So obviously, we continue with the QAA podcast, which is what we've now come to call QAnon Anonymous. And, you can go and find that anywhere where podcasts are distributed. But the thing we're really excited about right now is that we've started a mini-series network, which will allow us to kind of pour deeper resources and more attention into, these kind of limited series that are going to be entrusted to some of our internal talent and some pretty cool external talent. And we launched that. It's now at cursedmedia.net. And basically for an annual fee, people get access to all of the different miniseries. And there will be 3 coming out this year, the first of which is Science in Transition, which is a really interesting deep dive that we've not seen anybody else do, by Liv Agar and Spencer Barrows, into the idea of transness as a kind of medical diagnosis, and the relationship of various institutions, especially in the fields of psychology, the medical fields, and of course, politics, that have created a kind of backlash that you can actually trace back all the way to the 60s and 70s. So yeah, that's all at cursedmedia.net. So definitely check that out. We're very proud of it, and we think it's one of the few totally independent projects of this type that also will be tackling subjects that you don't see tackled anywhere else.
Awesome. Well, I will put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm going to put it in the show notes. So with that said, Jake, Julian, and Travis, thank you guys so much for giving some insight into this very bizarre world. And let's not make it 3 years before we jump on again.
Yeah, it's messed up when the QAA guys have to come on.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we always have to apologize.
Yeah, we always have to apologize.
If you're here, it can't be a good thing. It can't be a good thing. But very grateful for your time, and talk to you guys soon.
Thanks very much,
Brian.
Brian.